On that day, the silence of the Bel Air mansion weighed more heavily than the $17 million I kept hidden under the mattress and in accounts no one knew about. I was sitting in the living room, a room so vast and cold that my own breath seemed to get lost among the furniture covered in white sheets, like ghosts of a life that was never truly lived. I looked out at the immaculate garden, a green and sterile lawn that brought me no joy, only the confirmation of an opulent solitude. It had been 5 years since my son Ricardo had left me in a cheap nursing home in East Los Angeles, with a cold kiss on my forehead and the promise that it was for the best. "You're a burden, Mom, an extra mouth to feed," he told me as he left, his words cutting deeper than any knife. And I believed him. For years, I withered away in that place, smelling of disinfectant and despair, convinced that my worth had run out along with the last penny he managed to extract from me. But my husband's death, a man who had always seen our son's greedy soul, left me a secret, a fortune he instructed me to keep hidden until I was ready to save myself. And then, the sound of the doorbell echoed through the house, a noise so strange and invasive that my heart almost stopped. There he was, my Ricardo, with his rehearsed smile and his calculating blue eyes, looking older, more desperate. He cried, knelt on the Italian marble of the foyer, and begged for forgiveness, telling a story of bankruptcy and ruin. And for a moment, the mother inside me wanted to give in, but then I looked into his eyes and saw no regret. I saw the same predator who had abandoned me. In that instant, in the silence of that empty house he coveted, as his false tears stained the expensive floor, I made my decision. A decision that would not come from screams or revenge, but from a calm I didn't know I possessed. I would let him in, listen to his story, and for the first time in my life, I would not be the victim. I would be the strategist. If you love Jesus and believe this story will teach us something, subscribe so you don't miss the next episodes of Stories of Healing and Wisdom. Your subscription is an act of faith in your own transformation. I ask you to join our community of souls who have gone through something similar. I led him to the living room, the same one where my late husband, before he fell ill, used to read the newspaper every morning. Ricardo entered with the hesitation of a thief and the arrogance of an heir, his cold blue eyes scanning every inch of the space. He stopped in the center of the Persian rug, under the crystal chandelier that hung like a frozen constellation, and let out a long, theatrical sigh. "My God, Mom. I thought all of this had been sold. I thought you—" He trailed off, the sentence dying on his lips as he calculated the value of every object he saw. I moved slowly toward the kitchen, an old habit of serving that refused to die. "Do you want a glass of water, Ricardo?" I asked, my voice sounding fragile in the oppressive silence. He barely heard me. He was too busy running his hand over the back of a Louis XV armchair, still covered in its protective plastic. "Unbelievable," he muttered, more to himself than to me. When I returned with the glass of water, my hands trembling slightly, he finally fixed his gaze on me. His forced smile didn't reach his eyes. He looked at my simple dress, a floral pattern I had worn for over 20 years, and shook his head with false tenderness. "Oh, Mom, sitting in a palace, but you still dress like a peasant. Some things never change, do they?" The humiliation was instant, a fine needle piercing my chest. He said it with a playful tone, but it was a weapon, a subtle reminder of my place in his world. The old fool, the woman who didn't belong in that luxury, even if she owned it. I didn't answer. I just held out the glass of water and watched the poorly disguised contempt on his face, feeling the armor around my heart grow a little thicker. That comment was the first stone he cast, testing the resilience of the woman he believed he had broken forever. He drank the water in a single gulp, placing the glass on the coffee table with a thud that echoed through the room. Then, the performance began again, more intense and desperate than at the front door. He paced back and forth, gesturing with his hands, weaving a tapestry of misfortunes and self-pity. He spoke of investments gone wrong, blaming the economy, the government, and treacherous partners who, according to him, had stolen his brilliant ideas. Every word was carefully chosen to paint me as his only lifeline, the mother figure who, by sacred duty, should rescue him from a sea of injustices. I lost everything, Mom. The apartment, the car, even the watch Dad gave me. I had to sell it, he lamented, looking at his bare wrist as if it were a war wound. It was a blatant lie. My husband never trusted him enough to give him anything of value. In his narrative, he was the tragic protagonist, and everyone else, including me, were supporting characters in his drama. He approached me, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. If you had helped me more in the past, maybe things would be different. I always said that real estate deal was a gold mine, but you and Dad never believed in me. The audacity of his accusation left me breathless. He was rewriting history, turning me from the victim of his financial exploitation into an accomplice in his failure. And then, he used the cruelest weapon in his arsenal. Your grandchildren, they miss you so much, but how can I bring them into all this luxury, knowing their father doesn't have a penny to his name? He knew the mention of my grandchildren was my weakest point, the wound that never healed. He was using them as human shields, blackmailing me with the love he himself had denied me. His patience began to wear thin in the face of my silence. The mask of the repentant son started to crack, revealing the ugliness of greed beneath. He stopped pacing and stood before me, his tall, slender body blocking the little light coming through the window. His shadow covered me, and for an instant, I felt as small and helpless as in the old days. Enough of these silent games, Mom, he said, his voice rising an octave thick with frustration. I'm here, baring my heart, groveling, and you just sit there looking at me with that saintly face. I'm at rock bottom, you understand? Rock bottom. And you're here, sitting on millions, and you do absolutely nothing. What kind of mother is that? The accusation hung in the air, venomous and absurd. He leaned in, invading my personal space, his breath smelling of coffee and desperation. After everything I did for you, I put you in the best nursing home my money could buy, he yelled. That place, that warehouse for forgotten old people, where dignity went to die. He called that the best. The anger, an emotion I had kept dormant for years, threatened to overflow, but I held it back. I swallowed the scream that formed in my throat and turned it into an icy calm. I waited for him to finish his tirade, for his chest to heave with impotent rage. And then, for the first time that afternoon, I spoke, my voice no louder than a whisper, but as sharp as a shard of glass. Ricardo, I began, forcing him to be quiet to hear me. What you know about what I have is just the dust on the furniture. And what you did for me. Oh, we will remember that together, in full detail. As Ricardo stared at me, confused by my words, my mind traveled far from that cold mansion to a small house in Fresno, where the smell of freshly made tortillas and the sound of his laughter filled every room. I remembered how my hands, now trembling and spotted with age, were firm and nimble as I sewed his school clothes or held him when he had a fever. My husband, Roberto, worked 2 jobs, one in construction under the merciless California sun and another as a security guard at night. His eyes always tired, but his smile always present when it came to Ricardo. Our son was the center of our universe. We saved every penny, gave up any luxury, ate beans and rice for weeks on end so he could have the best shoes, the best books, the best education our hard-earned money could buy. When he was accepted into the university, we cried with pride. We sold our old car, a beat-up Ford that Roberto loved, to help pay his tuition. For us, it wasn't a sacrifice. It was an investment in the future, the certainty that our son would fly higher than we ever dreamed. I remember one night when Roberto came home with his hands bleeding from the cement, and upon seeing a photo of Ricardo in his graduation suit, he said, "It was worth it, Elena. Every drop of sweat was worth it for him. We gave him our lives, our sweat, and our savings, believing that the love we planted would blossom into gratitude and care. We were naive, blinded by a love that prevented us from seeing the man he was becoming, a man who saw our sacrifices not as a gift, but as an obligation. Ricardo's transformation was subtle at first, a slow and gradual erosion of the affection he once showed. It began in college, when the weekly calls became monthly, and then, only on holidays. He started to be ashamed of us, of our accent, our simple clothes, our modest house in a working-class neighborhood. The change solidified when he met Amanda, his wife, a woman whose ambition was as vast as her contempt for people like us. The first time I had them over for dinner at our house, I prepared his favorite dish, chili Colorado, with the same care as always. Amanda barely touched her food. I remember her looking at our chipped ceramic plates and saying, with a condescending smile to a friend who had joined them, "It's such rustic food. It has its charm, I suppose." Ricardo didn't say a word in my defense. He just laughed, a hollow, nervous sound, eager to please his new partner. That was the first of many humiliations. At a barbecue we threw to celebrate their engagement, I invited our neighbors and longtime friends, people who had watched Ricardo grow up. He and Amanda stayed in a corner, speaking only to their wealthy friends from the city, treating our guests as if they were invisible. At one point, I heard Amanda whisper to him, "When can we get out of this circus of horrors?" He took her by the hand and led her inside, leaving me alone to apologize to the neighbors, my face burning with shame. He was isolating me, putting me in a box labeled classless old mother, a hindrance to the sophisticated image he wanted to project to the world. The son I had raised was disappearing, being replaced by a cold and calculating stranger. After Roberto's diagnosis, the financial exploitation began shamelessly. Ricardo would show up with spreadsheets, charts, and promises of foolproof investments that would double our money. Money we needed for increasingly expensive medical treatments. He convinced us he was smarter, that he knew how to make money work for us. The truth is, he was sinking us into debt to finance his lavish lifestyle. The most painful humiliation happened in public, inside a bank. Ricardo needed a large sum to cover one of his business emergencies, and took me to the bank to withdraw from our savings account. I was nervous, my hands sweating as I filled out the forms. The line was long, and the teller who helped us was an elderly man, as meticulous and slow as I was. Ricardo tapped his foot impatiently, sighing loudly with every passing second. Finally, he exploded. "For God's sake, Mom," he exclaimed, loud enough for everyone in the bank to turn and look at us. "You're so slow. You move like a snail. Just sign the damn paper. It's just money. Money you don't even know how to use. It's dead weight sitting in the bank, while I could be working miracles with it." The words, "dead weight," hit me like a punch to the gut. The bank manager approached, and the people in line looked at us with a mixture of pity and disapproval. I wished the floor would open up and swallow me. In that moment, I was no longer a mother, no longer Elena. I was an obstacle, a slow and incompetent tool for his success. He had reduced me to a burden, a hard-to-open safe, and he did it in front of strangers so that I would never forget my place. When Roberto finally passed, I found myself completely at Ricardo's mercy. He and Amanda convinced me to sell the house where I had built my life, the house full of memories, with the promise that I would live with them in their beautiful new home to help care for the grandchildren I barely knew. It was a cruel lie. For 6 months, I lived in the maid's room, treated not as a mother, but as a servant. I cooked, cleaned, cared for the children, and in return, I received looks of disdain and orders. Amanda constantly criticized me, from the seasoning of my food to the way I folded the laundry. One day, a distant aunt came to visit and witnessed Amanda yelling at me because I had forgotten to buy her organic Greek yogurt. Later, my aunt called me crying and said, "Elena, how can a son allow his wife to treat his own mother that way? What happened to him?" Her question only deepened my shame. The final blow came on a Tuesday morning. Ricardo told me we were going for a drive, a treat to cheer me up. He drove for over an hour until we arrived at a gray, lifeless building. It was the Tranquil Valley Nursing Home, He left me at the reception with a small suitcase and said the words that echo in my nightmares to this day. Amanda needs more space. And you'll be better off here, with people your own age. It's the best I can do. He didn't wait for my response. He just turned and walked away, leaving me behind, discarded like a broken object, amidst the smell of disinfectant and loneliness. I spent 5 years in that place, a ghost, wandering through beige hallways. The loneliness was a physical pain, a constant pressure in my chest. I tried to fight the bureaucracy to access the small pension Roberto had left me, but the forms were confusing and help was non-existent. I was just another number, another old woman forgotten by the world. It was then, on a rainy afternoon, that I received a letter. It bore the seal of a prestigious law firm in Beverly Hills. My first thought was that Ricardo was in trouble again, that somehow his creditors had found me. With trembling hands, I opened the envelope. It was an invitation to a meeting regarding the final will and testament of Roberto Ramirez. I didn't understand. Ricardo had assured me his father had left nothing but debt. I went to the meeting, driven by one of the few kind nurses at the home. The lawyer, a serious man with gold-rimmed glasses, sat me in a soft leather chair and offered me tea I couldn't drink. He then revealed the truth. Roberto, suspicious of Ricardo's intentions, had created a secret trust, a fortune of $17 million, untouchable by anyone except me, and only 5 years after his death. The lawyer handed me a wooden box. Inside, along with the account documents, were a letter and several hardcover journals. My hands trembled so much I could barely open the envelope. The letter was short, written in Roberto's strong handwriting, but it was the first sentence he wrote in his journal, on a page dated a month before he died, that made the world stop spinning. My dearest Elena, if you are reading this, it is because our son has proven to be the vulture I always feared, but I have not left you defenseless. In these pages you will find the truth, and the truth will be your weapon. The air in the room grew heavy, laden with unspoken words, and the memories my revelation had stirred. Ricardo looked at me with a mixture of impatience and a growing nervousness, like a predator who suddenly realizes the prey is no longer afraid. In that moment of silence, my mind filled not with the fear he had always instilled in me, but with Roberto's voice, reading from the pages of his journal the night before. I had spent the night awake, devouring his handwriting, each word a piece of a puzzle I had refused to see. He had documented everything, every check I signed for Ricardo, every lie about business opportunities, every time our son visited only to ask for money. On one page, Roberto wrote, "Elena has the purest heart. I know. She only sees the boy she raised, not the greedy man he has become. My greatest fear is leaving her alone with him. That is why I must build a fortress for her, one that not even our own son can tear down." Those words were the key that unlocked decades of guilt and submission. I looked at Ricardo, at his handsome face and arrogant posture, and for the first time, I didn't see my son. I saw a stranger, a thief who had stolen not only my money, but my peace, my dignity, and my golden years. The pain of abandonment, once an open wound, began to heal, transforming into an armor of serenity. The fear of dying alone, the ghost he used to haunt me, simply dissipated. I realized I had already been alone for a long time, even when he was around. And the loneliness I felt in his company was infinitely more painful than the peace I found in the silence of that house. My shoulders, once hunched by the weight of shame, straightened. I no longer needed his love. I needed to honor my husband's love. And to do that, I had to save myself. Seeing that his pitiful act wasn't working, Ricardo changed tactics, shifting from pleading to threats. The change was frightening, like watching a porcelain mask crack and reveal the rot underneath. "You're acting strangely, Mom," he said, his voice taking on a cold, cutting tone. "I think the years in that place have affected your mind. You're senile. I'm going to have to take action. I'll call a doctor, a lawyer. I'll prove to a judge that you're no longer capable of managing your own affairs. This house, all of this," He gestured with disdain. "Should be mine by right. I am your only son, your only heir." He spat the words out as if they were absolute truths, the final weapon of a tyrant who has lost control. I let him speak, let him empty all his venom. Each threat he uttered, instead of intimidating me, only confirmed the wisdom of Roberto's decision. When he finally stopped, panting with rage, I answered. My voice did not tremble. It came out calm, level, each syllable weighing a ton of delayed truths. "Right, Ricardo. Let's talk about rights," I began, and he took a step back, surprised by my firmness. "Are you talking about the right of the person who called me dead weight in front of an entire bank? Or the right of the person who left me in that nursing home to rot after stealing the money from the sale of my house? Tell me about the right of a son who forbade his own children from seeing their grandmother, using them as bargaining chips to manipulate me. What right is that, Ricardo? The right of the vulture to wait for its prey to die so it can feast." With each question, I saw the shock in his eyes. He wasn't prepared for this. He expected the usual tearful, submissive mother. He hadn't counted on the fact that in my husband's journals, I had found not only the truth, but also my own voice. His arrogance, however, was a fortress difficult to tear down. Caught off guard, he resorted to his last option, public humiliation. He pulled out his phone, dialed a number, and put it on speaker. "Dr. Matthews, it's Ricardo Ramirez." "Yes, Elena's son. I'm here with her now, and the situation is worse than I thought. She's completely disoriented, saying nonsensical things, delusions about money and abuse. I need to start the process to have her declared incompetent as soon as possible. She's a danger to herself." As he described his fabricated version of events to the lawyer, painting me as a crazy and fragile old woman, I stood up. I walked unhurriedly to the large oil painting that hid Roberto's safe. With a calm I didn't know I possessed, I opened it and took out the wooden box. I returned to the living room just as Ricardo was saying, "She needs to be protected from herself." I placed the box on the coffee table with a soft but definitive thud. I opened it, revealing the inheritance documents and the thick-covered journals. I leaned toward the phone and spoke, my voice ringing out, clear and powerful. "Dr. Matthews, this is Elena Ramirez. My son forgot to mention a few details in his assessment of my mental state." I turned a page in Roberto's journal, revealing a list of dates and amounts. He forgot to mention the $17 million my husband left me in a secret trust. And this journal, where every financial abuse, every penny he extorted from me, is meticulously documented. I looked into Ricardo's eyes. The color drained from his face. The smug smile, the calculating gaze, it all crumbled, replaced by pure, absolute panic. "My husband knew exactly who you were, Ricardo," I said, my voice breaking not from sadness, but from an overwhelming sense of liberation. "And he left this money to me, so that I could finally live free from you." I hung up on the lawyer, and the next morning, what I did would leave everyone speechless. "We would like to feel your presence in this very moment. Please, write in the comments which city you are watching from and what time it is there now." By doing this, we create a network of energy and support for this story, a reminder that we are not alone in our battles. Each comment is a point of light in our healing process. The morning after the confrontation, the silence of the mansion was no longer oppressive, but an open field of possibilities. My first call was not to lament to a relative or seek comfort from a friend. It was to the most reputable real estate agent in Beverly Hills. When Mrs. Albright arrived in her impeccable suit and with her appraising gaze, she expected to find a sentimental widow attached to every brick. Instead, she found a woman with a single request: sell everything, fast, and for what it's worth, not a penny less. She was surprised by my lack of hesitation, by the way I walked through the cold rooms not with nostalgia, but with the determination of a jailer signing their own release papers. I wanted nothing from that house. I left behind the expensive furniture, the Persian rugs, the soulless works of art. I packed only a small box, photos from my wedding to Roberto, his journals, Ricardo's first pair of shoes, and an old recipe book with my mother's notes. They were the only things of real value amidst all that empty wealth. I signed the papers that sealed the sale in record time and, with the same pen, signed the lease for a small apartment in Santa Monica, a place with a sunny balcony and the sound of seagulls in the distance. The day I left that gilded prison for the last time, I didn't look back. I wasn't leaving a home. I was abandoning a mausoleum. I was, finally, after 74 years, beginning to live. I did not seek revenge against Ricardo. Life, with its cruel irony, took care of that. The first step I took was to change my phone number and instruct my lawyer to be the sole bridge between my son and me. His attempts to contact me were desperate at first. He left dozens of voicemails, alternating between tearful pleas and furious threats. He tried to contest the sale of the house, tried to reopen Roberto's will, but every door he pushed was barred by the legal fortress my husband had built around me. Without my money to sustain his facade, his house of cards collapsed with astonishing speed. The news reached me through distant echoes, a comment from the lawyer about his creditors, a note in a local paper about his investment company filing for bankruptcy. He lost the rented apartment, the luxury car, the fair-weather friends who were only by his side for the appearance of wealth. He, who had called me dead weight, became the real dead weight, a man in his late 40s with no possessions, no credibility, and without the love of the one person who had once given him everything. I felt no joy in learning of his downfall. I felt a deep sadness for the boy he once was and the man he chose to become. Justice did not come with a bang, but with the deafening silence of his own consequences. He didn't just lose the money. He lost the past, the present, and any right to a future by my side. With the fortune Roberto left me, I could have traveled the world, bought yachts, lived in the highest luxury, but what I most desired could not be bought: a purpose. So, I used a significant portion of that money to create something that would have made my husband proud: the Ramirez Foundation. The goal was simple and direct: to offer legal support, safe housing, and above all, dignity to elderly people, abandoned or exploited by their own families. The foundation's office was not in a glass skyscraper, but in a modest building with doors always open. My first case was that of a gentleman named Arthur, a retired carpenter whose children had put him in a nursing home so they could sell his workshop. Seeing the helplessness in his eyes, I saw myself. I fought for him with the best lawyers, and when we won and handed him back the keys to his life, the gratitude on his face gave me a richness that $17 million could never buy. My life changed. I traded opulent loneliness for afternoons of conversation at the community center. I traded silence for the laughter of new friends, and emptiness for a schedule full of meetings to help others. I built a new family, not of blood, but of souls who, like me, had learned the value of resilience. Today, I do not have a mansion, but I have respect, and that no one can take from me again.